Yeah. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for being here. Come on in. Hi. All right, let's get started. Thank you guys so much for being here. Let me get this going. So, you're all here today because we want to talk about why brand guidelines are a helpful tool along with an understanding of client needs when it comes to putting together the creative storytelling puzzle. I'm going to walk through what that means and share some tips for working creatively. So, if there's anything that you guys take away from this today, I really hope it's a sense of empowerment. Each and every one of you is an expert at what you do, and you're a steward for creative leadership and development, and you're an asset to your clients. And if you remember that, all of your projects are going to feel like exciting opportunities to create. So, for anyone who hasn't worked closely with me yet, my name is Sierra Neuwirth. I've been working as a designer for almost 14 years now. I'm a design director here at the marketing practice, and my values are growth and good humor. In order to understand why I'm here, I want to take you guys back just for a minute. Don't worry, there is a point to this. So I grew up in South Florida in a small bungalow that my parents have lived in since the 70s with a single outdoor shower. For real. I got this nice view, when you look up, which does a really good job, I think, representing my childhood experience. There are a lot of things to be said about the influences that lead us in certain directions. And for this one, I found that the benefit of a really small living space is that it forces you to get outside and use your imagination. So while Florida can be known for like a lot of things, one of them is its worship of materialism. And I think I was really fortunate in that that's not something that I was exposed to. I was a kid in what we call the real Florida. I spent time collecting tropical flowers to make potions. I painted murals on our back fence. I ran around barefoot and watched the space shuttle take off. I spied on my neighbors and wrote about it in my notebook because I am part of the Harriet the Spy generation. And I sold my drawings to my friends for Scholastic Book Fair money. All this to say is that I had a lot of creative energy and I needed to do something with it. So I eventually auditioned for an art magnet program for middle and high school. Because of that, I spent a lot of time surrounded by people who actually wanted to be in school and felt really passionately about something. And I think that surrounding yourself with really positive, passionate energy is so encouraging. I try to bring it to work now because, really, why shouldn't we be excited about what we do for a living? Like, there's no reason not to. I graduated with a degree in advertising from UF, and I worked client side at some super stuffy jobs like homeowners insurance and injury attorneys' offices. And then I challenged myself to freelance because I couldn't take it anymore. So I tried making wedding suites and branding for small local businesses, which was really fun. And then I found a job in hospitality marketing for local restaurants and hotels that were leaning really hard into this culture of promoting during snowbird season. So it was all about creating this really branded experience, telling stories about the way a restaurant experience could make you feel or the kind of person that you could fantasize about being by staying local. And yes, this is really youthful stuff for my portfolio, so be gentle. It really taught me a lot about what a brand does to tell a story, but it also taught me how you have to constantly reinvent the way that you tell the same story in order to stay fresh and relevant and not bore your audience. I moved to Chicago because I figured I could design it anywhere. And I found a job interview through a friend of a friend who invited me to a Bloody Mary Bears watch brunch one random Sunday. Fast forward a couple of office moves and title changes and location changes and 8 or so years, and here I am. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm grateful for all these little moments that seemingly and unknowingly move us along the path that is life. So what does this mean when someone tells us a story like this? There's a construct in marketing that suggests that people don't distinguish between brands and other people. We readily humanize or anthropomorphize entities like brands, which makes sense considering how much time we spend trying to foster the meaning of how a brand should make you feel by likening it to human qualities. So, when you think about it, it's easier for us to understand something that's as complex as a business when we reduce it down to a single person. So, in that line of thinking, the same principles are true when I describe my experiences to you as when we define a brand's personality for a client. So, all this to say is to try to remember your own moments because they're part of your brand and your story, and you might need to tell it one day, maybe in front of everybody. But so, me aside, let's talk about why we're here. When it comes to how we approach our work, there are some really obvious factors at play, and then there's some more less clear things that require a closer look. For me, this is where I focus to really understand where to begin. Beyond the direction that you're going to be given in a brief, we can identify the starting line for creative development by confirming two really important factors. The first is how robust and prescriptive the brand guidelines are for a particular brand. And the second is the client's desire for us to follow directions or forge ahead creatively on a given path. Understanding where a project sits based on these two factors will give you a baseline understanding of how you're going to wield your tools. It'll tell you if you should present something that's expertly detailed and aligned exactly to the thinking of the client, or if you can feel really comfortable taking a leap and trying something that's outside of the box. So breaking this down, variable one of this equation is the brand guides. These are the tools that help us tell a clear story for our clients. The brand we're working on is going to have guidelines in various stages of prescription from minimal to robust. Smaller, more mid-market accounts usually have really basic brand guidelines. The bigger the company, the more sophisticated they tend to be, unless they're looking for us to help define something new. If so, see James. Regardless of detail, they should help us to identify the visual language and the tone of the story that the brand is trying to tell. To be recognizable, a brand must contain consistent markers that help the audience identify, trust, and remember them. No matter how brave we are with the work that we do, we have to preserve that essence. Some brands do this very well and they are instantly recognizable. They've mastered this distillation of style and tone that makes them memorable to the core. See if you can guess this brand before the slide finishes populating. You can say it out loud. You got it. See, you only needed one thing and you already knew what it was. Brands can also be a beloved art form. You can find sets of brand guidelines sold in art stores, bookshops. This coffee table book from NASA is so cool. It's just like an incredible archive of some of the most interesting work for a very not creative company doing really amazing things. Aaron Draplin's book of pretty much everything he's ever branded, all in one place, and something that we care about because we care about the beauty of how a brand is considered and how it comes together. Identifying the level of use of guides for a project isn't about whether or not we should ignore what's been established. It's about understanding how detailed and specific the brand expects our work to be and where there's room to kind of color outside the lines. This is going to be most evident to you guys through the direction that's given in guidelines. So how do we get a sense of this? Start by looking at the standards and guides that exist. There's a lot you can learn about what a brand expects based on how granular they get. Is it descriptive or brief? Does it tell you more about the complexity of the company, like its history, its mission, its vision and sensibilities, or is it a really brief explanation of what the brand looks like based on key visuals like color and font and logos? Is it prescriptive or flexible? Is it super language heavy, or sometimes you'll see brand guidelines that have diagrams with exact placements of elements in a layout that you really shouldn't ever deviate from. If it's more generalized, maybe they're expecting you to make the best choice with a given asset, so you can see there's a little bit of flexibility there. Is it defined or open? Are there any examples of the kind of work that you've been asked to do, or has this not been described yet in the guidelines? Perhaps it's a co-branding exercise, a branded event booth, or work that explores the use of cutting-edge technology like AI. Observations like this are going to help you zero in on where your work is going to live within that barometer of minimal to robust and tell you what things you should be trying to bring to life. Yeah. I was waiting for that.
That happens once in every presentation.
Think of the amount of prescription that needs to be applied to a brand as a sliding scale for our creativity, or perhaps a spectrum. Less guidance is going to present us with opportunities to make our own path. Sometimes working without guardrails it can feel really broad and undefined, but that's where there's a lot of room for innovation. When working with really robust guidance, look at that as an opportunity to forge a relationship as a partner expert who our clients can really lean on and trust. Strong guidelines can also help you to laser focus your idea with minimal time wasted trying to kind of find your footing. So knowing the difference between these is a great way to understand the amount of time that you're going to need to spend in the development stage, which is really nice when you're trying to communicate the amount of time it takes you to accomplish something. And it also lets you know how quickly you'll be able to get to the actual doing of the project. We change the face of a brand every time we start a new project by adding to the depth of its story. That's why a guide can't account for every eventuality in the growth cycle of a brand. It's a reference that's going to point us in a really great direction, but it's down to us to solve the way in which it continues to morph and evolve. It's important for us as an agency to support our clients by helping keep their brand fresh and evolving, but always with the respect to that essence and overall intent of the brand. So once you have a sense of where your project falls based on how minimal or robust you will be referencing the brand, there's this other element to consider, which is the client. The second variable in the equation is the stakeholder's appetite for challenge. So this is a factor that can be as personal as the opinion of the client that's leading the project, or as universal as the mission of the business. Seeking to understand how much your client will like you to push a design is like a risk assessment. The creative process can feel like a calculated risk when you're trying to convince somebody that your idea is worth buying into. We know that it's not, it's just new and it needs to feel like the right answer for the client. And one of the best ways to narrow that gap is to start with a really clear understanding of expectations, so you're all starting from the same perspective of where to go. Some of the client teams that we work with are looking for us to execute creative that sits within their exact framework, to expertly emulate and rarely deviate. We have clients who are curious about the ways that we can kind of push outside their comfort zone, and ones that want us to absolutely blow the lid off of it. This may mean stepping beyond the parameters that are set to find a completely new way to say something. Some projects are straightforward enough that the brief is going to capture everything that you need to know. But if it isn't obvious based on the description of the project or the deliverables that are being described, try to ask some questions to get more detail. You can do this by gauging your client's appetite with 3 handy things to remember. The first is motivation. Seek to understand the end goal of the project and who the client is most excited about seeing that finished work. Work that a client is eager to put in front of their CEO is going to strike a very different note of urgency than the work that fills a typical advertising need. If you can find that out, it can be very helpful. The second is inspiration. Do they have similar examples that have already been created for the brand? If there aren't any, that's a really good indication that this client is open to seeing new things. Instead, you can ask where they got this idea or if there are any examples that inspired them outside of the brand. And the last one, because I like a theme, is perspiration. Is there a sense of urgency? Do they want the work to be worked on until it's exactly right, or do they need to get it out the door? Sometimes the weight of importance the project bears for the client and the company will help you to determine if this is work that you should be finessing and crafting or hustling because you need to meet their need through an effective turnaround. Now I'm the first person to advocate for creatives being involved in client interactions and part of kickoff conversations. There isn't a better way to understand how to solve a problem for a client than to have a dialogue and hear it from them. It's our chance to ask what the problem they're trying to solve is and help to shape that rather than to just receive a list of deliverables without that kind of chance to offer a creative solution. This isn't always our reality, so don't forget to ensure that you understand the motivation of the project through the eyes of the client by asking for it. Your creative lead, your project manager, your account director, they want you to succeed, so don't be afraid to ask for context. Establishing the client's appetite for challenge in the brief or through discussion is the clearest way to ensure work you're developing is in alignment with expectations. Oh, nope, don't you do that. Trying to skip, got to skip a deployment, sorry. So bringing all of that together, this brand client equation, it's completely variable and you're not always going to know the exact place where each factor lands, but you should have a sense of it before any project you start. So if you bring this together, any of the work that you're asked to perform should fit somewhere within this matrix. This is where you plot out your assessment of how much or how little brand guidance you have to work with and your client's appetite for creativity. Now, I want you to remember that innovation doesn't mean breaking brand consistency, just like emulation doesn't suggest a client isn't creative. A client's appetite for pushing brand standards is so nuanced and complex, and the more that we understand about the motivations of a business, the better we can meet them where they need us to. Think about some of your favorite brand work, your own clients, or even a recent project that you've been on. Where might it fall within this chart? Take a minute. If some of you are scratching your heads about it, I think that's fair. I've had clients that were just steadfastly fixed in one place on this, and then I've had ones that were just constantly in flux. Every project could have been like a different equation of that. It can be true across all client work, and it can also vary specifically from project to project and team to team. Some of this is going to be discovered through trial and error too. Sometimes you're not going to know until you actually do your first project with them. So get it in front of them, see how they react. Some people don't know how they feel until they see that baseline. And the more you work with a brand and a client, the more your relationship and understanding of what their needs are and what their baseline is going to become clear. These factors are vital information for you to understand where you should be starting from work when you're working creatively. They aren't going to answer every question for you, but they should set you up from a vantage point that allows you to best execute with the tools in your arsenal and ensure that what you're producing aligns with your client expectations. Are we all on board with this? Still feeling good? Great. So part one was all about one method for zeroing in on where to get started with creative work. Now we're going to get into the doing. So we've established that every project contains multiple variables and various degrees of intensity. We know that there's not a single method for creative success. So what we're going to focus on in part two is really good practices for creative thinking with real examples for how to stay engaged with guidelines as an aid, reflecting on work through multiple perspectives, the logic feeling equation, applying your observations to the present, and personal growth and empowerment. The first tip that I would love to share with you is to become fascinated with what you do. And I think this is a really good one to remember on the days when you're just not feeling it. We all experience ebbs and flows of passion in the work that we do. Excuse me. But don't forget just how much there is to explore and soak up in our clients' experiences. Even the ones that seem meh at first, they have a lot to offer if you look for it. And one key to staying engaged and invested is to never stop learning. Every time I revisit brand guides, I notice something new. Like this clever little way that SAP has personalized their font they've angled all the terminals at 45 degrees to reference the angle on their logo mark. It's this nice little light touch that makes their font feel just a bit more ownable and connected to the brand. And the other thing is to just not underestimate what you can pick up from having a conversation with people who work on brands. I love this tip from ServiceNow. Their team talked about how the color wasabi green should be used as sparingly as actual wasabi. So a little goes a long way. It's just like as soon as I heard that, I was like, oh, my God. And this one's more well known, but I really appreciate the fact that Southwest logo and their ticker symbol LUV, love, it's a nod to the hospitality and their dedication to that, but it's also where they got their start flying out of Dallas Love Field. It may not be facts like this that are going to show up literally in your creative, but it's little things like this that are going to help you to form a more meaningful bond with the work that you're doing. Which is why it's great to stay fascinated through learning. Regardless of whether the brand that you're working on has light or thorough guidelines, you should ensure that you have adequate time to familiarize yourself with their assets. They are the foundation that you apply to the story you need to tell, so ask to include learning in your project timeline. But it's not just down to the CLS and project alone. You need to do your own brand research. Keep the knowledge of keep your knowledge of the brand razor sharp by setting a reminder to regularly visit DAM pages and client sources for brand information, and ensure that you have the most up-to-date sources to reference. Check what they're posting on social, set Google alerts for articles that are relevant to them, and look at what the competitors are doing. Don't get caught off guard with out-of-date information. That's the worst place that you could be at when you're trying to convince somebody why they should do something. And once you have a good handle on the information that's been gathered, it is next time to practice. Before you develop your creative muscles for flexing standards, you must learn how to be exact with the materials that are given. Like any craft, the more that you practice wielding the tools of the trade, the better you can begin to understand where there's room to flex it. You can't push what you don't understand. And that's why emulation is such a great growth practice. If you've never written guidelines, this is your sign to try. And if you don't get to collaborate with as a design/copy unit as much as you'd like, this is your chance to find a buddy to work with. If not as a formal assignment, try it as an exercise in the next project that you do. Reflect on the way that you use the elements of the brand and your choices for execution. In fact, look at this page. SAP recently they launched a new set of brand standards, and it's really vibrant and playful. And they're using their brand mark, which they refer to as an anvil, in some really new flexible ways. It used to be, that brands would never let you touch their logo, and now we're creating patterns of it. This mark is meant to represent their solid commitment to the customer. On the left, these are some examples that we pulled from the brand guidelines, and the right is a real asset that we created as a result of it. Think about how you might articulate in words how those examples guided us to create this asset. It might seem simple, but explaining how can actually be really challenging. The more that you practice doing this kind of exercise, the more that you're clearly going to start to understand your unconscious processes and reasoning. So for example, if we broke it down, it might sound like this. SAP's anvil mark is utilized in a unified pattern and embedded into images of subjects expressing positive energy. It surrounds solution language to highlight the support enabled by SAP solutions. This is not a totally glamorous statement, but functionally, it communicates a couple of key things back to yourself and also to the client. It tells them the pattern is being used for a purpose. So that solid commitment metaphor of the anvil is being amplified because it's this grid pattern now, and it's coupled with an image that alludes that SAP is a connected support system for that person. It tells the client that we're aware of the recommended photography style, and it confirms that we can express it effectively. It gives us a defined set of rules as a designer for using these elements to guide the rest of the design of the project and the asset. What it is it's conscious usage explained to the client. Even if they can visually see that they like these elements and that it's working, talking through the how and why can help them get excited and help them feel a sense of pride for what you've created for them. Your ability to articulate why you made a creative choice is going to make you a better manager when you need to guide others and a better client partner when you need to sell your idea. The more you work at this, the more precise you can be. And the last element of being fascinated with what you do is about pushing the work. Precision helps us have our clients back. So part of innovating with guidelines is about how we as designers help the brand team make their guides come to real life, out in the real world. If we spot something that really isn't working, we can help them. We can improve it or push it or call it to their attention. Remember, they're us. They're just the client side of the mirror. So if we're invested and involved enough to be a critical eye for them, that creates a massive sense of trust. It's important to remember that clients don't look at the source as often as us, so we have to show them why we make the choices we do in order for their confidence in us to continue to grow. When you create a presentation of your work, reference the brand guidelines to explain why you use them, why you flex them, or disregarded them for a particular purpose. Bringing the team along on your journey helps them to buy into what you're selling. So, how can this kind of fascination and enjoyment of learning pay off? I'm so glad you asked. In previous years, SAP Ariba and Fieldglass had this internal brand experience team. They reviewed all their internal and external facing materials globally for the brand from a creative and a messaging standpoint. They were busy. Because our team had proven itself such an expert of the SAP brand with the work that we'd produced, they asked us if we could support them by operating as an extension of their team for the review process. Cool. We set up a dedicated team known as the Brand Hotline. A certain song may have been topping the charts that influenced that title. Basically what ended up happening was that we formed this hotline, and then SAP teams all over the world could submit requests for us to review brand questions they had, create materials for them from scratch, or review work that we'd created. We were working to review in-house creative and also what other agencies were doing. So we were literally looking at our competition and making sure they were doing as good of a job as we thought they should. We also went above and beyond. This was not asked, but we just thought we should offer the idea to ensure that anyone who reached out or that they didn't just receive an answer or an asset, but they got a detailed explanation of why that given answer aligned to the SAP brand. So the goal of that was that we could teach as a means to improve their brand assets kind of across the board. All of this is to say that if you learn to demonstrate mastery and excellence, you can form a solid bond with your teams, you can form trust with your client, and you can find new work streams for business development that you had no idea that your client might need you to do. My second tip is to know your audience. You're not just designing for the brand. You're designing for something that has to flow through an entire ecosystem that supports a project's success. There's this internal trifecta that I think of whenever I get to a good stopping place with something that I've designed. The first is me. Does it make me feel proud? Maybe I'm not in love with it, but if it feels like it's the best version it can be for what it is, then to me that's a win. A win, not a wind. Second, if I had to get on a call with my CD who had no context for what I was working on, would I feel good about what I had to share? Messy middle's always okay. I'm not expecting you guys to feel like you have to show perfection anytime you talk to anyone. That's not the goal. But I think really thinking about thoughtful development, always being a parent in your process when you communicate it, is just a really good lens to look at your work through. And finally, does it represent the business well? If you were looking at another company and you saw this work, would you be like, what's that about? Would you be excited by it? Would it make you feel like that business should be taken seriously? Some of what we create is a means to an end, and that's okay, but it's important to hold the work that you produce to a standard you personally feel really good about, and looking at that from a few perspectives is a really great way to gut check that. Now, it would be great if we designed exclusively with the goal to engage the audience. That is our primary objective, of course, but we have to sell that story through the filter of clients with their own external influences, objectives, and biases. The audience is who we create for, but they're not the only part of the goal. Our work has to be seen by the audience. In order for our work to be seen by the audience, it has to pass the test of client opinions, the pressure to please stakeholders, that one friend who really hates purple. It's why when I look at a portfolio, I'm more interested in the work that a designer had to do to compromise their perfect vision in order to work with their client than in seeing like beautiful, pristine, constructed work that was created in a vacuum. That first person who's showing that hard work, they're showing that they understand that the work is the best that it can be because they achieved a goal for a client through feedback and discussion and revision. Clients, they're just like us. Talk to them. The most important thing to remember when you start to feel nervous about presenting an idea is that the people on the receiving end are just people like you and me trying to do great work, do their job well, and have a good life. The best we can do is come in with the assumption that we're all going to work together towards a goal and try to work with them through that. If you can't present to them directly, Include your thinking when you share your work. Starting from that point will allow for a whole different tone of conversation. This is where you can learn a deeper understanding of where they're coming from and why they made the choices they did. This leads to a more sophisticated interpretation of the brand and a deeper personal investment that will make your creative better. Designing for your audience means selling it to people who are approving it. It's your job to tell a compelling story to them why you made the choices that you did. So make sure that you make the time not only to come up with your idea, but to also tell the story of why it works through your presentation. What context does this client need to understand your point of view? How can you take them through what helped you arrive at your idea? Think about them when you're putting your presentation of work together. Do you need to show how this concept can flex? Show it to them visually. Did you deviate? Explain why that was worth it. Lean into the brand heavily? Make sure you reference that visually so they're thinking about the work from where you're seeing it. Looking at your work with a few sets of eyes and keeping the needs of the client in mind will help you better sell in what you create. Tip 3 is the big feelings one. The blueprint is for the house, not the home. Let's talk about this in terms of creativity. So a house is where you keep your stuff, and a home is where you build your life. A blueprint is something that's going to consider big logical space, where the bedroom is and how many bathrooms you have, but it doesn't tell you how to decorate each room. It doesn't tell you about the personal taste that you have, the furniture you have to account for, how to creatively solve for like an odd space. You do that when you make your house a home. And creating work for a client is exactly this. Taking the logical equation to solve, and with your brand tools, you breathe life into it. The brief and the guidelines can tell you a lot about the space, but the way that you make it come to life is in your hands. This can be as grand as the emotion that's evoked from an idea, or as simple as the obvious thought and care that you put into a super clean layout. It's just as important because the evidence of care is going to come across. The intersection of logic and feeling is a good place to be. And being able to balance and wield both of those really is like a superpower. Just ask B2B Creative Barbie. She knows. Which kind of leads me to my next point. Use creative blueprints to challenge the way that you create, but do the same with the blueprint for how you work. Your teams are composed of smart, interesting people who have passions and hobbies and humor. You get to choose how you're going to show up for them. Work is as fun as you decide that it will be. Let difficult feedback be a catalyst for discussion and growth, not a weight that injects frustration into the way that you look at your amends. Find time to talk to the people that you work with without the intent of it being a work-related goal. Learn about what your colleagues are passionate about and advocate for them to get opportunities to expand that passion. A rising tide really does lift all boats. Think of any time that we've had to band together as a big group to figure something out. Like when Accenture dropped this inspiration page for New Applied Now, and it became this unifying mission for us to figure out how to nail it. We were all super excited because it was so fresh and new, and it was totally uncharted territory. And that was what made it really hard. But because we chose to approach it like a group project where we were all on the line to get it right, that changed the mental load of it to be something that was really exciting to solve. We encouraged people to go wild with it, to create work that was drawing from their personal interests and their inspirations. We dialed it way up so we could figure out where to dial it back. The influence of the guidelines is really clear in these, but ideas like this come from a lot more than guidelines alone. The sense of team support when this was going on was palpable throughout the company, whether you were directly involved in it or not. You can create this dynamic. We're building a business where you can advocate for the way that you want to succeed. The original blueprint for work as a 9 to 5 in a conventional office cubicle is totally antiquated. We're living through a shift that's presenting this perfect opportunity to draw up a new plan and build a dynamic that feels balanced and exciting and like something that you look forward to participating in every day. Let's create an environment that's a competition of kindness. It will show up in team dynamics, in the investment that people have towards the success of a project, and definitely in the work itself. My fourth tip is to lean on the power of now. From the moment the client hits publish on a set of brand standards, it's out of date. It's frozen from the moment that it's written, and it's incapable of knowing what's happening right now that should influence your creativity. You are the barometer for current events and trends and how that can affect and influence the story that you want to tell. I guess it infects the story a little, but that's not the word I would use. With the right level of awareness, your conscious choices can help position your clients with a modernity and a sensitivity that is empathetic to their audience. Flashback to 2020. I'm sorry, I know we'd all rather not. We helped to create a messaging and identity platform for SAP Ariba and SAP Fieldglass when they were acquired. It showcased their separate strengths, but it presented it in this go-to-market as one entity, and it was supposed to clearly be part of the master brand. Conceptually, it was all about portraying theoretical heroic work that SAP customers do and was a means to show extraordinary outcomes that they could achieve with SAP. We made guidelines and assets that teams around the globe were supposed to use. It was intended to be launched on giant physical boards, digital and printed. It was going to be at the keynote for SAP Ariba Live at their 2020 March conference in Las Vegas that was canceled a few days before the pandemic shut everything down. So there's been this momentous shift in society where COVID is making everyone work remotely, and suddenly all of our messaging about collaboration and our visual portrayal of people working in the office looks totally out of touch. But something very real is happening where SAP solutions are solving huge procurement and supply chain issues that are happening live because of COVID. Real will always be theoretical when it comes to credibility of a client story because it speaks for itself. So we pivoted everything and we focused on an empowerment campaign. Procurement makes it possible. It's a creative platform around which to showcase real customer stories, real ones, not theoretical ones, business outcomes and product benefits. So from this simple organizing thought, we could create concepts and presentations and videos and brand assets, and it was a huge hit. I mean, it was so exciting. We were talking about like truly 500 nurses found in a week for the front lines and being able to like get hospital beds to places they needed to be. Like it felt like, you know, this frenetic energy that was just so excited to be a part of. The work that you do is only as good as it is true, and you are the judge of whether the positioning of the work that you're doing is appropriate. If brands are anthropomorphic, we want moral virtue and conscious emotionality to be part of how our clients' messaging is received, and that takes your observation of the now. My last tip is that you guys are experts. I want you to think of yourself as an expert. Do we do this enough? We really should, because we are. And we continue to develop that expertise with every project, every day. Clients ask us to do this because they can't. They're busy being experts of their own disciplines. So the more that we can reassure them that they're in good hands, the better. Remember why we came here? Because these are given to us as a framework for action. Photography, logos, colors, iconography. They show up like this. And we take it and we create this. We create calls to action and feelings and experiences and tension and questions and answers. Something that has a heartbeat. You are the conduit for transformation, the vessel that makes the work come to life. It is you. It really is. It can't be done without you. If you look at a project and you can identify where to begin with the tools that are given and the tone that is set by your client and team, everything else is just part of the process. So be a brand leader, a problem solver, add more beauty to the world through stories, educate yourself and others, build relationships, think critically, bring your peers up and support your team, and look for the enjoyment in what you do. Remember, brand guidelines offer a framework for maintaining consistency, and they should never limit your creativity. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Are you available for voiceover work?
You may recognize me from my work on the Boeing or BlackBerry campaigns. Awesome. Well, if you did hear anything today that you want to talk more about, write it down, send it my way. I can dig into it more. I can host a workshop. We can have a conversation. I'd be happy to. Thanks.